This is interactive again. We keep the presentation itself very short. Our members have asked us to launch the first industry trends report. That is around business transformation and was kindly sponsored by Google. We interviewed over 250 end users to find out what that meant to them. We asked them a series of questions from global organizations through to SMEs, from heads of business to heads of IT, and their team members. What we want to share with you today is actually some of those key findings, almost the top 3 findings. And from that, we can ask the panel to get involved, but also from that, you can ask some questions. There might be some quite surprising thoughts, but when we actually analyze the findings with kindly Ian and with Itai and a couple of others, there were some very interesting debates that came up, some trends and so on. So this is interactive. Please don't feel you need to leave the 3 gentlemen just to speak. You can get involved. Benita's here, and we need to help her walk because her shoots hurt her so much that actually if we make her walk more, she will never talk to any of us again. So please do raise your hand at any point. She'll bring over a microphone, and at a suitable point, we'll ask you to ask your questions. So we're going to focus on 3 particular areas that we thought were insightful and useful, and the 3 gentlemen kindly are going to share their findings with us. But we're going to move on to that straight away. So the first one we'd like to talk about is how is the adoption of cloud actually evolving? So pushed by small to medium-sized business or large organizations, what does that look like to you? Now, forgive me if you're towards the back and you can't see as closely, let me share it with you. So key findings, 36% of those people said they were already using cloud technologies, very closely followed by 32% actively researching cloud computing. So pretty much we're looking at 70% either already using or indeed actively researching. And then those other figures ranging from 9% down to 3% cover everything from testing through to we're planning to implement in the next year, all the way through to the next 3 to 5 years, or indeed not yet sure. So I'd like to go straight over to the panel and actually ask them why they think that happened. And Graham, I'm going to, because you're in the middle. Graham, as the head of security at Michael Page, I'm going to start with you. If we can start when you start your discussion, try to tell us who you are and where you come from. Obviously, Ian, we know who you are, but if we can ask you just to kick off just with a little bit of a background to who you are, and then we can start to just look at why that is, and do bring your questions out, please.
Hi, my name is Graham Taylor. I'm head of IT security for Michael Page International. I'm responsible for the UK and Asia Pac areas. Although we've not actually moved into the cloud yet, it is something that we're looking at. I think what was quite interesting from that result was something else that comes up a bit later in the report. And I wonder if it was because initially the larger companies didn't move into the cloud straight away because they were developing their strategy and developing their techniques for securing the cloud and securing their systems in the cloud. Whereas the SMEs were probably more confident in allowing the cloud providers to provide the email systems and the database systems and security for them. And I think that's possibly why it's changing now. So the larger players are actually getting into the business, into the cloud now, because they're now much more comfortable with setting their systems up and securing their own systems. And that's why they're moving into the different part of the cloud as well. They're moving into the infrastructure and the elastic computing and storage.
Thank you. Itai.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Itai. I'm responsible for marketing of Google Enterprise in the UK. And as Emma said, we sponsored some of this research. I think that to answer the question about why we think that is, I think it's kind of natural that people are adopting more and more cloud technologies. It's no longer just a fad. I think it's kind of clear. Everybody appreciates that. I think what helps the very, very large numbers, and I think we can easily see that it's around 80% or more that are either having it already or actively pursuing it. There are actually various flavors of cloud depending on who you ask, and it can be what, as Graham mentioned, the infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. Those are all elements of cloud. But the benefits of any one of them for any organization really are very compelling. And I personally think that in 2-3 years it will be much closer to even higher in terms of how many people are actually using it. It will just go higher and higher. We'll talk later about whether it will ever be only cloud, which I don't think it will be, but there will be more and more of it. Yeah.
And Ian, thank you.
So I'm Ian Tackett. Sorry that you're getting me again, but sort of my take on it is partly that we're quite a sceptical lot as IT guys, and when you look at something like cloud, we've been sold a lot of concepts over the years, from ASP to software as a service, and all of it sounded great, but when you actually scratched the surface, you started to see elements of it that didn't quite gel. I think all those pieces came together. So when we heard cloud, first of all, I don't know if we could say we were initially skeptical, but then we realized that the pieces like the large data centers were there, the bandwidth was there, so we could all connect safely. Security had become better. Things like safe harbor agreements started to come in, talking about data protection, and suddenly we realized that, yeah, maybe it can be used. So there was a belief that you could use it, but then, of course, there's a larger risk for larger companies to actually go into this side of things. So although they might be able to look at it from a smaller perspective on smaller projects, I would imagine the larger companies have a longer planning cycle than maybe the SMEs, who would be a bit more agile as far as such projects would be concerned. So that's sort of my take on it to a certain extent.
Thank you. And just a quick question. Oh, brilliant.
Just quickly, I mean, what percentage of their IT is on cloud? Because that may be they put in something on cloud, but it's 0.1 of 1% of what so 82% is putting 0.1 of 1% on the cloud, whereas 82% put in 100% on the cloud. Just get some base around.
Did we have any information on that?
No, I think that the level of information at this initial report, we won't be able to say exactly which proportion of these guys that said they're implementing something, how much is it. What we are going to get to later, I think, I don't know if it's going to be here or in the report that's actually going to be released later on, is kind of an analysis of what proportion of current estate is actually on cloud versus on-premise versus what people think it will be going in the future. And you're absolutely right, and I think I referred to that in my answer earlier, that nobody today has 100% or claims to have 100% on the cloud, and if I remember correctly, nobody's saying, or very few probably are saying, that they're going to have 100% on the cloud. It's just a matter of more and more people, whilst maybe 2-3 years ago, people would say, no, don't want to have anything to do with it at all. Now they're saying, no, I actually have something to do with it, and whether it's 1% or whether it's one application here or actually more and more fundamental applications, it will get more and more. Probably not 100%. But
So Google hasn't got all this stuff on the cloud.
Google has got a large proportion of its stuff on the cloud, very large proportion.
I just have to say, I do know of one business that is 100% in the cloud now, and they've just moved. They're a recruitment company as well, and they've just moved their whole business into the cloud because they wanted to open an office up in America, and so they moved it 100%.
Is that a large company, or is it small?
It's a smaller company.
Okay.
It's not as big as us, of course.
Any other questions around that? Okay, fine. So another key area that we focused on was, are people using the cloud to get more for less? And let's just look at these to see whether you're surprised or not. So you've got two pie charts here. The first one actually looking at spend really in 2011 and 12. So that very large proportion there is an increase of 64%. So they see their cloud spending increasing this year and next by 64%. Only 1% felt that it would actually decrease, 1 in 100. And 15% felt it would remain the same, and 20% not yet sure. So still in that fact finder sure stage, evaluation stage, or not actually even yet at any kind of evaluation. The second one, when we look at that, actually is your overall IT spend in the cloud. So suddenly you see that increase is only 34% versus 64%. So suddenly 30% less. in terms of a decrease, you're seeing that IT spend overall is actually decreasing by 24%, nearly a quarter of respondees. And in terms of remaining the same, 30%, so double that of cloud. And indeed, not sure being 12%, so less than actually just on the IT spend, sorry, the cloud computer spend. Sorry, it was a late night last night. So if I can go to the audience again now, I'm going to start with Itai just in terms of the cloud computing spend before we go into the overall IT spend, if we can.
Sorry?
If we could just start on evaluating that cloud computing spend versus the IT.
I think they're very interesting to look at in comparison to each other, because it goes to the heart of the question that was raised earlier about how much of it is on the cloud at the moment. And what this tells is a story that I don't think is that unexpected, is that cloud investments, a very, very large proportion, almost 2/3 of people think that cloud investments within IT are going to increase. What's actually a little more interesting in here is that is in the context of more than 50% think that the overall IT spend, which I assume in most cases actually encompasses the cloud, is either going to remain the same or decrease. So we have overall IT spend kind of doing this or slightly this, and cloud within it doing this. So whatever people had before in terms of cloud, whether it was a little bit or more, is going to get bigger, is going to get a bigger and bigger share. And again, that is manifests itself in later findings about the proportion of cloud versus on-premise based technologies.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether these figures actually show people have been putting a toe in the water and investing a small amount in the cloud, seeing how it works, how it responds, how it fits with their business. And now they've done that, then they're a bit more confident in spending more money and investing in the cloud.
Yeah, I don't see these figures as a surprise at all. We know the adoption of cloud is gaining momentum. We know a lot of people are willing to invest now. And so the level investment will be going up and commensurate with your total IT budget. That's where you're going to be focusing your money, because you actually see that there's some cost benefits to come out of it as well. So that's how I see it.
Okay. And in terms of a potential double dip, do you think these figures will change?
Well, I'll take that. In terms of double dip, I'm in the public sector, so our double dip's already hit us. So we, in our organisation, have to cut back office costs by 50% over the 4-year CSR period. I've already got a long way there. They can't cut me anymore. So I will be looking at spending more on cloud if I think it can save money. But I don't think I'm going to get hit by a double dip, but I think more commercial organisations might find that the future looks a bit more difficult, and the business case will have to justify an investment in cloud. So that's that one. I've just noticed we're only getting Steve joining in down the front here. We could co-opt him onto the panel later on, or
Absolutely.
whatever. But if there's anyone else back there who'd like to join in, then please do.
I don't have anything to add. I mean, these are the results of basically that have come from people here. I think what Ian said makes perfect sense. If anybody else here has any other thoughts about how a double dip might impact your plans.
It's not about the double dip, but it's about the changing structure of the workforce. I've got 6% of my population now in the field all the time. And the cloud is the perfect way for me to address how to give them information, how to get them connected to our network without having to provide complicated security back-end to our core systems. So cloud, in a simplistic form of collaboration, is a great tool for us at this point.
I'd sort of argue that some of the people sort of question around this particular question around their cloud spending, they might not actually be fully in control of what they spend on cloud computing. And I'm not alluding to the fact that any of your staff can pick up a credit card and use their expenses, but you know, I use a lot of public cloud resources. It's singly invoiced, it comes through finance systems, it gets signed off. But once you give your guys the ability to spin up instances for a business requirement and you're charged by the hour, it's actually very difficult to keep that cost under control, because the environment's there, and the technical guys can create instances where previously they could say, well, look, I've got to go through a capital procurement process to buy extra tin to stick in my data center. And therefore, they can only use what they have physically available to them. And now, you could cap that ability, but then again, if you cap it, you lose the ability to be able to flex when your business needs to flex. So I'd actually say that, we're almost back to the mini computer days when, you're looking at charging models for MIPS and everything else, but actually the financial governance now and the controls of actually understanding what your business is using and consuming is one of the challenges that I don't think we really have a full grip on. You get it in arrears, you get the invoice, but actually understanding what you're consuming on an hour-by-hour, day-by-day basis isn't quite as easy as you'd think. So I think it's a very interesting strategic question to ask, but I'd say on a tactical basis, I don't think many of us really know what we're spending on cloud computing on a day-to-day basis once our guys fully get in control of the environment, turning things on and off.
I must admit, I've tried to play around with setting up a server on Amazon, and I looked at it and I needed my technical guys to come and help me, because unless you really understand your business and what your I/O requirements are and what your data throughput is, you've got no chance of working out how much you're going to spend, and it's sort of a bit of a black art at the moment to me. In many respects, you just take a flyer on it and hope that you're going to do okay, but the trouble is once you commit, you can't exactly turn the tap off. So I think from that perspective, it would be nice to have some easier ways to set up things like servers remotely. I'm talking about Amazon at the moment. I think Google, I'll say it while you're here, that the cost basis or the concepts that they put out are much easier to understand because you know what you're getting. Use everything at the same time for one set fee. That's quite useful to someone like us. When you're paying on a transactional basis, I agree, you're back to the old MIPS days and you have no idea what you're going to be spending. Or, well, you probably do have some, but it's more difficult.
Certainly for us, we've got 10,000 engineers, design engineers, mechanical engineers, and they would love to 3D model everything in the world. And if they saw this capability, they'd say, oh, I can do this. And the gentleman is absolutely correct. The cost could just spiral if you didn't have some restriction, some control, or some tap. That if a new product gets introduced, then you want to come in and do your modelling. But once it is, you don't model that native engine anymore. And you don't let the engineers, because they love to play engineers.
Yeah, I think it's governance all round us now. I mean, it's the same as all financial governance. But it is a lot harder to put it on when you don't know what you're going to be spending up front.
Does it actually make it easier, because at the moment all of our costs are pulled into IT and recharged out to the business? Surely the whole point about cloud computing is we can actually assign those contracts back to business departments and say, you're consuming, you control it, it's your P&L. And they've then got a direct financial interest in how much compute they're using. I don't know if there's a survey question on this, but when people are buying cloud services, who's paying? Is it IT or is it the business unit?
I think this touches on a point that I'm not sure we're going to get to here, but it's definitely in the report, which is exactly about the difference of perception about the cloud between IT people who identified themselves in the survey as IT people and people who identified themselves as business people. And I mean, if we had the IT and people kind of IT here and business here, we'd have a good scrum afterwards, because the differences are quite remarkable in especially what they think are the barriers to adoption, and on the side of productivity improvements, of getting things done. Business do tend to see that as more of a benefit, and IT tend to see a bit more of the, oh, there's an issue here and there's an issue there, elements of control and governance that are perfectly valid, but do tend to come up more. Just be aware of the fact that it does tend to come up more with the IT people and less with the business people, as you might expect.
Did you have a question? Go on.
It's not actually a question. Sorry, Paul MacDonald, Kensington and Chelsea Council. It's not actually a question. It's just bearing on the thing about the costs that I recently went to somewhere where Canonical were talking, and they were saying that people are buying the Ubuntu cloud server to install in-house in their own servers when one of their business people has gone out, bought something on the cloud, but then it's been so successful, and because they've bought it on a scalable basis, when they've got 100 times the amount of users and use, the price has gone up 100-fold, and it's made it economic to bring it back in-house. But that's actual practical experience from the people who sell and set up the Canonical Ubuntu cloud.
Sounds like marketing getting involved again to me, but there we go. I don't know if you have any comments on that one. And there's someone at the back, I think.
Yes. One of the presentations this morning suggested that there was greater productivity in people using their own, say, mobile devices. Perhaps there's greater productivity in people using their own credit cards and then recharging the business if those sorts of activities are successful. Certainly it would bring a sense of you justify the use, you now control that business benefit of it, and if you get it wrong, you wear the costs. What would the panel think?
If only it was that easy. I think that's it's an age-old thing. I mean, when you try and look at things like total cost of ownership these days, you sort of say, where does it actually start and where does it actually stop? And I'm constantly battling what part of marketing spending on sort of web design or infrastructure is actually an IT cost. And it's very difficult to get a grip on it. And then, like you say, people go things on credit card. They sign up to web conference, WebEx stuff and things like that, which we don't even know about. So if we could control it, we would. Unfortunately, I think the argument very often goes, look, we're only trying to do our jobs, and we find this is an efficient way of doing it. Therefore, we don't want to get IT involved because they'll just say no. And that's our problem. We've lost a bit of power in that respect. There we go.
Following on from that exact point, coming from used to be in a telecoms industry background, very much the company or the IT department look at the telecommunications as something that they own the actual phone system in-house, and the business look at it as a mobile phone thing. I remember sitting there 15, 20 years ago with the business side saying we want mobile phones, and the IT saying, no, you've got to use our internal system because we've spent all this money on it, and they're saying it's not doing what we want it to do. And I see this cloud approach very similar. I see the fact that a lot of people just go and buy their own iPhone or their own Android phone because they don't want a BlackBerry, because it's the thing that the company rolls out, and it doesn't do what they expect it to do and what they're expecting it to do in comparison to their business. And I think this is something that I'm seeing more and more, is that the speed of adoption of the IT department rolls in a 4-year, 5-year cycle. The speed of adoption of the business side rolls in a 1-year, 2-year cycle. Nobody keeps a phone for more than 2 years unless they've been given a BlackBerry for work.
I mean, it's not like I have much to add. I think those are all good stories and very good angles that talk about, to me, it sounds like these are the benefits, starting from the 100 users, scaling up, and then saying, well, actually, it makes more sense to bring it house. Fine, that's great. But it probably wouldn't have started if, to begin with, it would have had to go through some committee saying, can we have it or can we not have it? And expensing it, yeah, it creates some headache for the finance people in terms of how do you account for things. And I'm not trying to belittle it, but it has very significant benefits, I think, in the capabilities that are being delivered through those models.
I think it is quite interesting the way when we, this whole thing was about cloud, but more and more you get all these other things dragged into it. So the consumerization of IT has all happened because of the cloud and the fact that there are systems out there that you can use that are so easy to grab hold of. Who hasn't battled with users who went out and, because you had a block on your email system on the size of the attachments, that they started using Dropbox when you didn't realize it, or things like that. It's interesting the way that whole consumerization has come around. And I think also the one thing in the previous panel that we didn't quite cover, but was about this collaborative sort of side of things and the way all the collaboration software is coming in and changing the way we work. It's quite an enabler, as they say.
Thank you. So I'm going to move on to this last slide. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for your involvement. I'm just going to move on to this last slide for the last 5 minutes. So, key enablers. nicely done. Key enablers and perceived barriers. Again, this is small writing for those of you at the back. It's slightly being at Specsavers, but just to bring it to life for you, security was the number one, over 60%. Data protection coming up second, integration with existing systems, and governance coming through as well. Lack of management understanding, compliance, vendor lock-in or provider lock-in, all the way through to how available is it, and those concerns, performance, and so on. So I'd like to just look at the security, but other key areas that are coming through. Right down at the bottom, only about 4% of people had no concerns. So if I can bring that straight to Graham, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's the security angle is obviously one that interests me because I'm head of IT security. But it would be nice to see if it broken down into what area of security they're actually concerned about. I'm sure a lot of the SMEs, when they actually moved into a cloud environment, their data center security, physical security, was suddenly enhanced by about 1,000%. But other aspects of the security may be a bit of an issue, but I'm sure a lot of time when they actually move into the cloud, their security is enhanced, if not only because they're made to examine their own security in-house before they try and move into the cloud to compare the two. And the other area of that is the data protection. It came out in the earlier session about jurisdiction and where data is stored, which obviously for a recruitment company is a big issue because of the Data Protection Act and keeping it within the EU environment.
Thanks. I think Graham has very nicely pointed out what is essentially a potential difference between the perception of security threat and the reality of the difference between an existing solution and the one that you're looking into. So I won't elaborate any more on that. The other point I was going to make was 2 points. One about the bearing in mind that the same people that filled out that survey, you and your colleagues, are saying that while security is a barrier, these are the same people saying, well, 2/3 are actually going to invest more in cloud. So yes, it's an issue. Yes, it's something, I think it means that it's an issue we want to look into, but we definitely don't think it's insurmountable. We think there are ways to come around it. We think there are ways to make it secure enough and good enough, and in some cases actually better, and go into various cloud technologies depending on on where it is. The other point I was going to make was not specifically about security, but on the barriers in general. This is where I don't think we're going to cover it now, but it definitely is in the report and makes interesting reading, is what I mentioned earlier about the differences in perception of barriers. And so for example, taking the lack of management understanding, which comes number, what's it, 4 here? 5, is actually very much so in the IT side of things, whereas the business guys saying, we understand it. I mean, they don't think that's a barrier at all. And so there's an element of, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but just something to bear in mind. If you're in IT, bear in mind that the business has a very different perspective, and vice versa if you're in business here.
I think certainly when business see things as so easy to actually do, it's more the fact that they feel, don't you just flick the switch and it works? I suppose that's why the IT team would always see more negatives in moving to cloud than a business user would. And I think one of the questions, we're going to come on to that one about the business later, or is that
We're
last
going
one?
to, yeah, that's the last one, just to give a snapshot, a teaser and a taster.
Oh, right, okay. But I thought what this was interesting in showing is how people moved on with their perception of the cloud. And, a few years ago, the barrier might have been, I don't know what the cloud is, or I don't know which providers there are. Now, look at the granularity of the problems that are being seen as barriers, and these are all things that the likes of Google and Microsoft have to head off and make sure that they've got these parts covered. And you just wonder what's next. Next year, once people are actually moved into the cloud and operating in the cloud, what other things didn't we think about that are going to hit us at that time? So it's going to be quite interesting.
Absolutely.
There's a man over there.
Thank you. A while ago, my company took the view that work is something you do, not somewhere you go. So the idea was to get rid of a lot of empty space and offices and whatever, which are 30 or 40% populated at the peak. And one of the, it wasn't a barrier, but one of the issues we've come across is we provide someone with a brand new laptop, does what they want, it's got Wi-Fi, it's got 3G, they drive to the middle of a National Trust site, we're a construction company, all of a sudden, no 3G, no Wi-Fi. You know, we also have people who deal with CAD drawings. Gentleman at the front, you'll know about CAD drawings, you'll know that you can't put them onto a floppy disk. Yeah, back to the old 8-inch jobs. The problem isn't so much with the infrastructure in terms of broadband in downloading, it's when someone makes a change and then the A in ADSL kicks in and they're sitting there waiting for these things to go back. So it's not a barrier, but it's something that we thought, well, it'll just work without taking into account our specific environment and the sort of information we're sending backwards and forwards. And that has been a sort of barrier for a lot of people moving away from the office. They've seen what their early adopting colleagues have done, seen the problems they've had. And so we have a private cloud infrastructure which operates fantastically in an office, but doesn't really address what we put in place to achieve in the first place.
Yeah, we moved house out in the countryside and we now get half a meg broadband. So you think, oh God, that ends it.
David Thatcher from BSI. Picking up on Graham's point about security and DP as well, the fact you're saying maybe breaking that down into sort of themes could be interesting. I wonder whether one of the barriers might be the fact that within security there are currently a lack of credible, specific, dedicated cloud security standards. Now, in terms of what ISO is developing, that may well change in the next 6 to 9 months, perhaps. And whether that might, if that prevailed and they were there, that would maybe cut through some of the issues at the bottom there about vendor offerings, this ability to sort of almost cut through the cloud wash and say, okay, well, you know, you're both saying you're 27001 certified, well done, but these guys have gone the extra mile in terms of, and like I say, I'm not promising it's going to happen, but they've also now met the specific requirements of a cloud-flavoured 27001, which, as I say, may well be coming soon. Would that, do you think that could be an interesting thing to explore? Or is 27001 enough because it's risk-based anyway and the cloud's another risk?
I think I've got a fairly contentious opinion of the 27001 standard anyway. Mainly to do with the scope, the statement of scope. There's a bank that got an empty room, 27001 certified, just to prove that because you can your statement of applicability actually affects what's covered in the standard. But I think a standard that was well defined and well written and gave people some sort of confidence in how it compared to the whole of the business, not just one part of it, would be very useful.
On that note, because we can hear people next door, if you've got further questions and you haven't got a meeting right now, please do stay, ask, or Itai will be over with the Google stand. I think the other gentleman could go towards the Google stand as well. If I can just, first of all, thank you, gentlemen, very much indeed. Very much. Thank you for all of those who completed the survey. We will obviously be getting you that report to you, so please do stay with us. It's still at printers coming towards us.